Hello, everyone. Welcome to the NewsBrowse News broadcast. NHK reports that finance ministers from the Group of 7 countries and other officials have reached an agreement to accelerate efforts aimed at diversifying supply chains for critical minerals. This move is specifically designed to address China's dominant market share in the sector. The crucial meeting on critical minerals, including rare earth elements, took place in Washington on Friday, held concurrently with gatherings of G7 and G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. Japanese Finance Minister Katayama Satsuki co-chaired the session, which included participation from critical mineral-producing nations and international financial institutions like the Asian Development Bank. Participants confirmed a commitment for both producing and importing countries to collaborate in establishing more diversified supply chains. Japan announced a significant plan to provide $20 million for a new project initiated by the ADB, which will offer technical support for mine and infrastructure development in producing countries. Minister Katayama emphasized that securing a wide array of stable suppliers would also foster growth in these producing nations. She further stated that Japan intends to. Canada's largest airline, Air Canada, has announced the suspension of 6 routes, including both domestic and international services, in response to a sharp increase in aviation fuel prices. This surge is attributed to the ongoing Middle East conflict. According to a report from Zio Shabal, experts describe the current fuel shortage crisis as potentially the most severe in aviation history. Specific international routes affected include Montreal and Toronto to New York's JFK Airport, which will be paused from June 1st to October 25th, and Salt Lake City to Toronto, suspended from June 30th until 2027. A planned Guadalajara, Mexico to Montreal route has been halted indefinitely. Domestically, services from Fort McMurray to Vancouver will stop on May 28th and Yellowknife to Toronto on August 30th. Air Canada stated that fuel prices have doubled since the Iran conflict began, making less profitable routes unsustainable. Passengers will be notified and offered alternative travel arrangements. Another major Canadian carrier, WestJet, has also announced capacity reductions. John Gradick, an aviation professor at McGill University, emphasized that unlike previous crises, the current situation presents a critical issue of fuel supply, underscoring the severity of the challenge facing the global aviation industry. From the Canadian press, Iran announced it has fully reopened the Strait of Hormuz to commercial vessels, a critical waterway for global oil shipments. However, questions remain regarding the actual freedom of passage, as Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi indicated that ships would still need to use routes designated by the Islamic Republic, potentially involving tolls. Simultaneously, U.S. President Donald Trump declared that the American blockade on Iranian ships and ports would persist in full force until a comprehensive deal with Tehran, including on its nuclear program, is achieved. Iran views the ongoing blockade as a violation of last week's ceasefire agreement with the U.S. and has threatened to reclose the strait if the blockade continues. This development comes amid a fragile 10-day truce between Israel and the Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. Trump suggested that new talks with Iran might occur this weekend. While oil prices initially fell on hopes of a resolution, Iran's semi-official news agencies Fars and Mehr raised concerns about the lack of clarity and supreme leaders' approval for the strait's reopening, underscoring internal debates within Iran. A federal judge has issued a preliminary injunction blocking the proposed $6.2 billion merger between local television giants Nexstar Media Group and Tegna. The Canadian press reports that U.S. District Court Chief Judge Troy L. Nunley in Sacramento, California, ruled that a group of 8 attorneys general and DirecTV are likely to succeed in their antitrust lawsuit against the deal. The judge found that the merger would likely lead to increased prices for consumers and a reduction in local journalism, as Nexstar has a history of consolidating news operations when owning multiple stations in a market. The deal, which would create a company owning 265 television stations across 44 states and D.C., had previously been approved by the Federal Communications Commission. However, Nunley described the FCC's approval process as unusual and noted the Department of Justice's early termination of its investigation. New York Attorney General Letitia James hailed the ruling as a critical victory, emphasizing the fight for fair competition among local TV stations. UPI reports that the U.S. Supreme Court has unanimously ruled in favor of Chevron in a long-running case concerning damage to Louisiana wetlands. The dispute originated from Chevron's corporate predecessors refining aviation fuel for the federal government during World War II. The 8-0 decision sends the federal lawsuit back to a lower court, a move that could significantly impact a prior state court ruling of $745 million against Chevron intended for wetlands restoration. Chevron had argued that the state court lacked jurisdiction because the work was conducted under federal government directives. This Supreme Court decision may also affect other similar lawsuits currently pending against fossil fuel companies across the United States. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.